day, Bridgewater College alumni and current students. I just wanted to take some time for alumni and friends to reach out and talk about the election. My name is Dr. Gentry. I'm here at Bridgewater in the History and Political Science Department, and I specialize in elections and especially youth voting. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. So one of the big things when you think about elections is to be thinking about the role and importance of the presidential election, obviously, which is what we're going to focus on today. But a big idea that we really want to think about is the Electoral College. So there's a fundamental difference between the Electoral College votes and what we call the popular vote. Now, the popular vote is simply the percentage of overall Americans who are voting for a particular candidate. So it's never going to equal 100% because we every year have write-in ballots or we have people that vote for third-party candidates. But a majority of the time we have one of the two major party candidates winning the election and winning the popular vote. There's only 4 times in American history, 2 times in the 1800s, and then in 2000 and 2016 that the Electoral College vote has been different than the popular vote. Now we talk about the Electoral College because it is how we decide who the president is. It is in the Constitution that the Electoral College was a way to insulate government from the people, so a way to protect government from the whims of the masses. And this was particularly important because the framers themselves wanted to protect their early democracy and really did want to limit people's power in affecting the system. And so they created what's called an indirect election of the president. And it used to be the case that electors were decided on not by the people, but by the state legislatures, similar to how the senators were decided, appointed by the state legislature. However, that's not the case today. Today, electors, which are the people that are going to represent the state in the Electoral College, are decided on by the major political parties. And when you're casting your vote for the presidency, you're casting your vote for an elector to represent you in the Electoral College. Now, the system that we have in the United States is what we call a single-member district winner-take-all. So whoever gets a majority of the votes wins. In many states, 2 states have proportional representation, Maine and Nebraska. That means they can split their Electoral College votes based on proportional representation. However, the important thing about the Electoral College is that you have to get 270 Electoral College votes to win. That's why when we're thinking about Texas's 38 or Pennsylvania's 20 Electoral College votes, that it really matters which states are big enough states that can swing an election. So the Electoral College, again, is the formation created in the Constitution to protect from people influencing government. However, today, now, individual people can cast their ballots for electors that are going to represent them. Interesting, in 2016, we did have some what we call unfaithful electors, which mean people that did not vote for what a majority of the people in the state voted for. So we had some examples of Bernie Sanders or the Spotted Owl, which were not on the ballot, but that the electors voted for. So when you cast your ballot, you're actually voting for a political party who has chosen electors that are going to represent you in the Electoral College. Presidential campaigns themselves have to race for 270 Electoral College votes. So what this means is they need to get a number of states to equal 270. Now, it is absolutely possible that at the end of the day, that 3 Electoral College votes are not gotten by the 2 major political party candidates, and that the 2 major party candidates have a tie vote at 265 to 265 Electoral College votes. The likelihood in this election is 0.5%. In that case, then Congress would decide who the president's going to be. So both candidates are focused on what we call battleground states. Now, in political science, when we talk about battleground states, these are states in the last 3 elections that have changed their party affiliation about who they voted for, who the entire states voted for in an election. What's interesting in this year is that political scientists are paying attention to states that have not traditionally voted, that are considering voting a different way this year. That's why states like Texas and Georgia are getting more attention. Even though they're not normally considered battleground states. These are solid Republican majority states where in the past 3 elections they voted for a Republican as the presidential candidate. However, early polling has shown that these states are actually leaning Democratic. So, I expect that youth rates are actually going to be higher this year than in previous years because states have actually made it easier for college students and young people to vote. They've made it easier for everybody to vote as a result of the pandemic. So when we're thinking about these things, we need to think about what impact has these changes in election laws where we have excuse-free early voting, which means you can vote up to a month early before the election day to vote, or allowing for widespread mail-in ballots. Again, these are all as an impact of COVID, which again has directly impacted this campaign with how people can vote and has also impacted the campaigns for how they are going to reach voters. So one of the big things that you want to do if you're a campaign is to register voters and to make sure those people get out to vote. And so campaigns have had to focus on registering voters when they normally do door-to-door canvassing, which has not happened very much during COVID. So you want to make sure that you want to understand the dynamics and impact of COVID, which has directly impacted this election overall. So I expect that youth voting rates are actually going to be higher than they were in 2016, which is surprising because when we have a competitive election, which means we have no incumbent candidate, which is somebody that's currently in the office is running for re-election. When we have that a contested race or a competitive race, it tends to be the case that we have higher turnout. However, we have seen this year with early voting that the numbers of voters are much larger than they were in 2016. So the rates of people voting is even higher. So I expect that young people, because many states have eased their requirements on not only mail-in ballots, but also early voting with excuse-free early voting because of the pandemic, that more young people are going to get out and vote, but not necessarily on election day. One of the things that we have seen more recently is state decisions that are directly impacting elections. And these are state decisions about ballots. So one of the important things that we have to talk about are the court decisions that are being made, because these are decisions about state law, about how to count ballots, when to count ballots, whether to count ballots. And so these are 3 important characteristics that we have to think about because it's the question about election integrity and counting the votes. So there have been court cases about, especially in what we call battleground states like Pennsylvania, where there's been questions about you put the ballot in a secrecy envelope and then put it in the mailing envelope. So some people haven't put it in the secrecy envelope, so do we still count that? It's a question about whether or not that matters, and that's going to impact the election. So, a third or fourth thing that we need to think about is the question about whether or not we're going to find out on election night who is going to be president. Now, many states have said that they will probably have the decisions by noon on Wednesday, which is most likely the case. It's only a few states that are not allowed to open up early voting or mail-in ballots in order to tally those votes. It's only 8 states, so it's likely many states will already have their vote counts. But again, because the integrity of this election has come into play, meaning people have begun to question the electoral system, that states are being very careful with how votes are counted and how they are communicated, because it matters. It matters if you were wrong when you call one state over another, as we saw in 2000 with the state of Florida, which literally made the Bush campaign and broke the Gore campaign. So we do expect, at least in my opinion, within 1 week, we should know who the president's going to be. Many states will report by Wednesday at noon, but some states are going to continue to be counting ballots, such as Pennsylvania and North Carolina, which are going to be, again, those battleground states. So there's a couple of states to look for on election night to see if they're changing, and that's going to be Pennsylvania, which is a big battleground state, which some of our alumni are from. Hi, Pennsylvania. With its 20 Electoral College votes, is likely to swing the election and is extremely important to both political candidates, and was important and was a swing state in the 2016 election, voting for Trump in 2016. So look out for what Pennsylvania is going to do. Texas is on the board this year as well, which means that Texas is in play. Texas has been solidly Republican since the 1960s. This is not surprising, but we do see some demographic changes in Texas that have been introducing support for Democratic candidates. However, the race in Texas is close. That makes it a battleground because it's so close. Georgia is also put on the board this year, was not previously, and has not been thought about as a battleground state because, again, it's voted solidly Republican really since the 1960s, but we have seen successful Democratic campaigns. And North Carolina, which many students and alumni are from, and North Carolina has played an important role in, again, rethinking about engaging people. And so those are the big states to look out for on election night, in addition to the traditional battleground states. But many of the battleground states that we saw in 2016 aren't on the board in the same way. Wisconsin, Michigan are both having wide, what we call spreads, wide differences in voter preferences, wide enough that it's easier to tell. Now, one of the things that you're going to be looking for is not only the polling, but on election day, we do what we call exit polls. Now, these are specific polls where people wait and ask people in locations to say, hey, how did you vote? Not everybody's going to answer, but that's how we get some more accurate numbers as to, on election day, who's actually out to vote. The challenge is, because of the number of people that have early voted or done mail-in ballots, there is going to be a skew, which means there is going to be a lean for one candidate or another, because early voting might say one thing, but election day voting might say another. And so we have to bring all of the votes together for it to matter. So I just wanted to share real quick the presentation that I had, just some big takeaways for you to be thinking about. When you're thinking about these things, again, it really matters that we count all of the votes, that we absolutely care and cherish about other votes that are going to impact the outcome of elections. So, as you can see, again, takeaways that there's a big difference between the Electoral College vote and the popular vote. It's absolutely possible for somebody to win the popular vote and not win the Electoral College vote, or win the Electoral College vote and not win the popular vote. The number that both candidates are looking for is 270 Electoral College votes out of a possible 538. The reason why that is, every state gets an allocation of the number of electors based on the number of representatives in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And, right, so that's 535. And then District of Columbia, D.C., has 3 Electoral College votes. I expect that youth voting rates are going to be higher this year, though that's not typical. We know that COVID has directly impacted how people are voting this year and when people are voting this year. In addition, there have been court decisions which we do need to pay attention to. It might be the case that there are going to be fights in the courts. And again, to look out for what to watch out for on election night, what's happening in Pennsylvania, Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina. Virginia is already expected to vote Democratic this year, meaning choose electors that are Democratic electors. But all in all, many counts are going to be finished by noon Wednesday or within a week. So we should know within a week, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, not this Tuesday, but maybe the next Tuesday, we'll know who's going to win the presidential election. All right, that's all from me. Thank you so much and have a great day.